My cheating wife tried to say I was going mad w/jealousy and that my suspicions were imaginary, but how can a married woman be behaving so erratically? You are married, you are supposed to commit to your relationship and be faithful, but not my wife. Well, she thought I was a fool, and I decided to show her that I was more than that. My name is Michael, and I am a project manager. I am 29 years old. The name of my wife is Natasha, and she is 25 years old. I love what I do, and I am very proud of what I have been able to achieve for myself at a very young age. And so after everything, I decided it was time for me to settle down, find myself a good woman who could take care of me and my home. That led me to meet Natasha. Natasha and I met through a mutual friend. We met at a business dinner. I liked her immediately, but it looked like Natasha was a kind of person who was not fit to be a wife, because at that time, if you had a conversation with her, she was always going on and on about how she wanted to explore the world, be a free bird, and so on. But honestly, within me, I thought everything was going to change if he started dating, and I introduced her to family life. But I was wrong. They say the leopard can't change its spores, right? After me and Natasha started speaking, everything was going on smoothly, but thinking back now, that was what she wanted me to believe. I told her about my plans for her. She bought into it, and she became my girlfriend officially. Dating Natasha wasn't easy at first, but when I got to know her love language, it was easy for me. I discovered that Natasha was actually a troubled person. She went through certain trauma when she was young, and because of that, she had no family. I told her that my family was going to be her family and she was welcomed anytime. I took her to see my mom, and my mom didn't really warm up to her, and I didn't really know why. I knew that my mom can be a little difficult, but when I told her that this was who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, she accepted her without any problem. Well, she had no choice. It took me about 3 months for me to get to know Natasha very well. At that point, she was also making an effort in her own way to get to know me. I was happy about it because I felt like the feeling was not one-sided anymore. Natasha had told me that she didn't like my apartment I was staying in at that time. So when I proposed to her, she accepted we had to change my apartment. I gave her the responsibility to do the changes and also do the decor. When she accepted to marry me, I was very happy. I felt like everything was falling into place for me. Not long after, Natasha planned our wedding and we got married very quickly. My family was present. It was very beautiful. It was the happiest day of my life because I got to marry the woman I loved. I told her that there was no limit on my card and she was free to have the wedding of her choice, and so she went all out. I invited friends, family, and loved ones. My colleagues were also there. After the wedding, I decided that we should take a trip for our honeymoon. By that time, we hadn't really parked into our new home. We were still at our hotel. From the hotel, we went for our honeymoon at a beautiful destination. I think that was where half of our problems started from. It was on the trip I discovered that Natasha had a drinking problem, which he blatantly refused. I couldn't enjoy our honeymoon well because I was either taking care of her or avoiding her, because it was exhausting to always see your wife tipsy. I was able to sit her down and made her realize that she had a drinking problem, which she accepted. She accepted that she was going to see a therapist who we were going to talk to together. After the honeymoon, we moved into our new house. Firstly, it was kind of tedious for us because the parking and arrangements were so complex. We had to pick a room, put it together, and make sense of the whole house. After that was done, I sat Natasha down and we made plans to go and see the therapist. After months of seeing the therapist, we were able to deal with her drinking problem through solving the underlying issues, which was closure. After that, we went on to be our normal selves. Our lives were going well. We occasionally go out together and we were able to do things together as a couple. We communicated more and it felt good. Not quite long, Natasha got a job as a sales rep in a company and she started working. She was very happy. You could see the excitement in her. It was a form of freedom for her. She started to work and make her own money, and she became really independent. After a few months, the Natasha I knew changed drastically. She was now very out there. Well, I didn't see it as a bad thing because I wanted her to win herself. Business was going fine for me and I was doing okay, but everything changes overnight. It felt like a dream. And it was thanks to somebody, Eve. Eve was a friend that Natasha got acquainted with at her workplace. Eve was definitely a bad influence on Natasha. She was always giving her advice that was not good for a married woman. Natasha could come home and be like, "Why wasn't food ready?" She could say I could come home earlier than her and not make food. But I became so confused because this was something she was doing comfortably before. At that point, I didn't know that she had been fed advice until Natasha invited Eve to our home one time. I honestly felt like something was off with her. She was so condescending. She could always say how I was lucky to be married to Natasha and how I was not doing right by Natasha etc. I became so confused. I told her that Natasha was well taken care of and also we loved each other. After she left, I told Natasha to not take any form of advice her friend was giving her in any way, because I believe she doesn't mean well for her. But at that point, unknown to me that Natasha had already been captured by Eve. Natasha started coming home late and she could always blame it on her work and so on. Our issues started out small, but it became another thing. Natasha started to avoid me, but I told myself that I wasn't just going to be a weak guy and just nag. I decided to leave her alone and give her space. The space I decided to give her actually worked for me because I avoided her for about 2 months. We were in the same house, but we barely saw each other. I decided to leave the master bedroom for her and I parked into the guest bedroom. After a while, Natasha became frustrated and I ignored her and she came to apologize to me. Natasha thought that I was some kind of weakling whose world revolves around her. I indeed love her, but I was not planning to be used as a boy who was ready at her beck and call. After she apologized, I told her that everything was only going to be over if she made sure that she stopped taking advice from Eve, because Eve did not mean well for her. She agreed, and indeed she obeyed me and stopped seeing Eve, and I was happy because I stopped her from working as a sales rep where Eve also worked. I found a job for her and she was able to start work as an assistant at my friend's company. I did all of this because I loved my wife and I wanted the best for her. A few weeks into Natasha working at my friend's company, she started to have problems with people working there. She became so paranoid at every given chance and I didn't understand why. She started to accuse me of putting her in a place where they overwork her. It was literally from one problem to another. I didn't put her there for her to start complaining about work ethics. Something I also discovered after our marriage was that Natasha was really a lazy person. She couldn't do basic things around the house. She could always complain about every little thing, but she was not ready to do the needful. After my friend saw that she was not committed to work at his company, he decided to let her go and I supported it. With Natasha, I can say that I was very patient with her. I believe that it was my fault that I expected too much from someone who was not ready to give it all. After she stopped working, she was now at home on a regular basis. I could come back from work and she could always complain about me coming late, and I could always explain to her that I was busy and I had a lot of things to do at the office. But Natasha didn't believe me that I was actually busy at the office. The stress at the office and coming back home with no peace from my wife, I decided that I should go on the trip that I normally send my employees because I needed a space to breathe, and my wife was making life uncomfortable for me. I didn't want her to continue frustrating me, so I went on a business trip. I called her from the office and I informed her that I was going to travel for business for a few days. She dropped the call on me. I called her back and she didn't pick up. I went on that business trip and I spent about a week there. During that period, I didn't get a call from my wife, but I didn't care. I enjoyed my stay there, and when it was time, I went back home. The trip actually made me relax because I didn't think about anything and I concentrated on my work. I got home late at night after arriving from the trip and I didn't see Natasha at home. I called her, but it didn't go through. After I settled in, she came back quite late into the night. I asked her where she had been all night and she said I shouldn't question her for doing the same thing that I was doing. I let it slide because I didn't understand what she was saying. It went on for a while. I kept on seeing Natasha with men, and when I asked her, she could say it wasn't anything important and that they were just friends. We could go out on dates and I could see her flirting with different men and she could outrightly deny it. And all these angered me a great deal. I called her one day and I tried to explain to her that I could not take being cheated on and definitely not from the person I loved dearly. She said I was going mad because according to her, she was not cheating on me. I took her word for it. A few weeks later, my friend came to my office and told me he had seen my wife, Natasha, at the club with a man that wasn't me. He even showed me a picture and I took it to go and show her. That day, I explained what I was going through with my wife and how she was saying I was jealous. But it wasn't jealousy because I saw that my wife was going out with men in my presence. My friend advised me that I should handle it carefully and not make any rash decisions. I took the picture and I showed it to my wife and he told me that I was just imagining things that weren't there. I became so angry and I left the house. How can my wife be doing something I can clearly see and she is telling me otherwise? I decided to go see my mother and I told her what I was going through in my home. She advised to be very careful and she went on and on about how she never liked Natasha and how her spirit was very off. It was as if my mother was making all my suspicions true. I became so right to me. I asked my mother if I was really going mad or if my suspicions weren't valid, and she told me that I was fine and I shouldn't just jump into conclusion and that I should also give her the benefit of the doubt that she might not be cheating on me. But I knew that my mother was saying that in order for me to relax. I decided to stay with my mom for a few days. My mother made every effort to put me at ease when I was staying with her. I was leaving her place to work every day. But when my mother brought the idea that she wanted to speak with Natasha and I was very skeptical about it at first, but she said she wanted to just settle us and for things to go back to normal. The next day, my mother had called Natasha over, but she gave my mom different excuses that when she was ready, she could come. A few days later, Natasha came over to my mom's house and she tried to explain to Natasha to calm down and build her marriage, but Natasha was very defensive. She kept complaining that I wasn't doing right by her and I was neglecting her, but I knew it was not true. We had a huge argument in front of my mother and I walked out. How could Natasha be denying something she was clearly doing, which was cheating on me? She made me look as if I didn't know what I was doing, and also it made me look like I wasn't in control of my family. My mother was able to settle us, and I left her house with Natasha. We got back home, and Natasha and I had another huge argument again. This time, it turned out that Natasha was really obsessed with having issues with me. She went on and on about how I took our family issues to my mother and so on. She called my mom different kinds of names and how my mom was a threat to her marriage. I refused to answer and I went on with my life. I could never hit a woman because my mother taught me better, but when she was coming at me, I had to just give her space. After a few days, things had calmed down between us. By then, I was able to resume work, and not quite long, Natasha had come to me that she wanted to know where our marriage was going because she was tired of all the issues we were having. I told her I was also tired, but if she wanted a divorce, I was ready to give it to her, but she said she didn't want to divorce me and that she loved me. I started to feel like maybe she was bipolar. Because what was the meaning of one moment she wanted to chop my head off and another moment she wanted to be in my hands and arms and she wanted peace? It was really confusing. She told me that she wanted us to go to therapy. I agreed and we started going to couple therapy. A few weeks into it, we were really fighting for ourselves, but everything came crashing down when I discovered that she was still seeing her friend and she still had a kind of relationship with her. It was there that everything made sense to me. Natasha started to see other men and Natasha flirting with men and so on made absolute sense. It was Eve that was encouraging her. I knew right from the beginning that that lady was a bad influence on my wife, but it was only my wife that was not seeing that Eve was out to destroy her. After I found that out, I went on for a while and I refused to speak to her. I could come back from the office and I could avoid her. So it was made clear to me that she had really been influenced, so all this while she was making me look like a fool, she was really cheating on me. She made it out to look like I was the one that had the problem, like I was jealous of sort. It honestly looked like I was mad. I decided that I was not going to be used as a puppet anymore. I was going to take back control of my life and my family. And the decision I decided to make was going to be cutting off any form of problem. And that is going to start from my wife, Natasha. I was completely done with the marriage, and I was going to make sure that my revenge was going to be as cruel as possible. But firstly, what I did for myself was to heal from all the trauma that Natasha made me pass through. She made it look like I was crazy, that I didn't know what I was doing. But deep in my heart, I knew I wasn't mad. I made sure to sit her down and I asked her what she did during our marriage, and it was then she told me that she had been misled by her friend Eve. She had told me that Eve was known for destroying homes because she was always jealous of the happiness of people close to her. Natasha begged me to forgive her, but I made sure to continue to ask her questions. She had told me that Eve had convinced her to cheat on me because I was also doing the same. But I made Natasha understand that I never for once cheated on her. But she told me that she knows now. I was very confused at her attitude. All of a sudden, you have realized that you have been fed lies all these while? She told me that I should forgive her and we should forget everything and move forward, but I told her I wasn't going to do that. I didn't have plans to forgive her because she treated me as trash. For someone I showed love and care, I expected more from her. I told her that I needed space and she should find somewhere else to stay for the meantime. She agreed that I do need space to think. She moved out of the house with a few of her things, and I decided I was going to make my final decision with my peace of mind as my top priority. I went to my mother for advice, and she told me to do anything that could make me be at peace with myself. And she told me that she was ready to support me regardless of anything decision I decide to take. After a few weeks, I decided to call my lawyers, and I told them to go ahead and draft the divorce papers as soon as possible. And it wasn't long before the papers were ready, and it was sent to Natasha. A few days after she received the papers, she came to my office to beg me to forgive her, but I told her that honestly I was tired and I had nothing to give to her anymore. If she had valued our relationship, she shouldn't have cheated on me. She kept on going on and on about how she was misled, but I made her understand that cheating was something she made up her mind to do. She wasn't forced to do it. I told her that she should come over to the house and get her things because I was ready to move forward. The divorce went on for months because Natasha was refusing to sign the divorce papers and it was slowing me down. At that point, all the feelings I had for her were already gone. My lawyers kept reaching out to me that Natasha had refused to sign the papers. She thought that there was something to save, that was why she was delaying it. She kept going to my mother's home, but my mother didn't listen to her because when my mother wanted to settle us, she never gave her any form of regard. She had always disrespected my mother, and I don't know why she was going to her. I called Natasha and I told her face to face that there was nothing to fight for anymore and she should stop going to my mother. After that day, she stopped and she signed the divorce papers. I was finally freed. I decided not to give her a penny in the divorce because she didn't deserve any. By the time the divorce was finished, about 5 months later, she came to my office to apologize to me because of how she treated me and everything she made me pass through. I told her that I was over it and we should just move forward. But I asked her if I ever treated her badly in the marriage, if I ever looked down on her, but she said no. I was so happy I wasn't the problem after all. I didn't have to deal with the burden that my marriage failed because I didn't put in enough work. Natasha left my office that day and I was so relieved that everything was finally over. I can finally move on and be free from everything. It was indeed over. Update. It has been about a year since I last saw or even spoke to Natasha. I am happy now. I think I have healed from all the trauma, and I honestly believe that I had put pressure on her to be my wife then. I never did that, but seeing everything that went down, I feel like Natasha didn't love me like I loved her. Everything was seriously one-sided. I was the one that was holding that marriage together for that long, and when it was time for me to stop giving, she finally realized her mistake and she decided to fight for us. But when I needed her to fight, she was not there, rather she was in the arms of other men. Right now, I told myself I was going to give love a chance, but this time I wasn't going to force anything, because I feel like I forced things with Natasha. I will just let everything play out, and that has been what I've been doing for a while now. I definitely hope that Natasha finds love, but I don't care if she does. I don't even want to think about her or anything that has to do with her. She doesn't deserve my empathy at all, so I'll definitely leave my thoughts fat away from her.